I think GPT is making people incredibly stupid. And honestly, I saw this in myself recently and it was really concerning. It's really shifted the way I'm trying to use AI differently now. For context, I've been running a software company for the past 3 years. So software and tech, it's my thing. I do it all day, every day. And I've been recording and documenting every day for the past year and also building this business every day. I think recently I realized that I was using GPT for just way too much stuff and I stopped doing that. And I think I made more progress in the last 3 days in just doing the right things and going about them the right way compared to, a week previously that I was playing ping pong with GPT. The long story short is like, at first it's really useful because it just lets you get stuff done faster. I would use it to code and things like that. Hey, can you code this function? Can you code this thing? It just speeds up that whole process. As you start to use GPT for that, you might get a little bit worse at maybe the programming or things like that if you don't actually pay attention to what GPT is doing. This was my case back in January. I was using GPT for essentially all of the programming work that I was having. And actually at one point I got really frustrated because GPT couldn't figure something out. I was just getting too lazy to use my own capabilities. Eventually I sat down and I scrapped AI and I was like, I need to figure this out myself and actually take a hold of it and like dive into it. Whereas before I was just kind of prompting GPT to do things for me, but I wasn't thinking deeply about the problem. And as soon as I actually thought about it, it wasn't that hard. Like I've done this dozens of times before and it was just going back into it, and lo and behold, I was able to make far more progress without GPT than I was with it. One of that reasons is that GPT is this like global average of how people do things, but it often lacks context. It's not usually able to see the full picture, and sometimes it ends up going in circles and things like that. But there's this more sinister layer, I think, which I felt recently, which was just I was using GPT to help me with decision making. And what ends up happening, like one thing is a skill set. For example, I don't know anything about cooking or being a chef. So if I went to GPT about that, the average chef is probably better than I am in cooking and things like that. And so if I ask GPT, I think that's a great use case. I lack knowledge in that thing. The thing where it gets really bad is when you start to use it for the decision making. That I think is very easy to fall into when you get into the daily habit of using it. And you start just ask GPT everything. And I think other people have realized this as well. I started going to GPT for things that honestly, core decisions that I should be making and taking ownership of. And of course, I have a gut feeling, whatever, but I'd always go to GPT to kind of validate it and things like that. And the reality is you're getting an opinion from a kind of net average, which I don't think is always great. And also you lose your individuality in that way. Sometimes it's good to run things by GPT because maybe he might be able to pull things out that you didn't think of before. Honestly, what I found recently is that I was using it way too much to help me make decisions and basically to validate myself, to reduce the amount of uncertainty that I feel, because I'm a business owner and I deal with a lot of uncertainty all the time, and that's uncomfortable for me. And one of the ways that I have of trying to reduce it is validating it, whatever I want to do or I'm uncertain about, validating that with other people. And GPT obviously gives you immediate answers and things like that. Honestly, it doesn't have the full picture of what you want to do, and it doesn't have your brain. You will lose the thing that you have ownership of if you give it off to somebody else. Like, are you really in control if you constantly ask the AI for the decisions and ideas and things like that? And I realized like it was slowing me down a lot because I kept going to it for basic things I can sit down and figure out myself. And to give an example, I had a call with somebody who I wanted to build something for and I wanted to thank them. Previously, I might have gone to GPT and said, hey, I'm trying to think of ideas of how I can thank this person, whatever. And GPT would give me 10 ideas from some random blog posts on the internet, which honestly are not that great and are just kind of like some half-assed answers or are totally just impractical, right? Like send them a bouquet of flowers, which is just totally not relevant and contextual. And I can give it more and more context, but it will never think critically. It will never push back on what you're saying. And that's the thing that it lacks. The thing that distinguishes quality thinking is the ability to be critical of ideas. What I ended up doing is I realized that I shouldn't do anything for free just yet because I need to go and speak to that person a little bit more before I do that. GPT would never tell me that because it's never going to tell you that what you're doing is a bad idea or things like that. Very rarely does it do that. It doesn't think very critically on ideas. There's this book that speaks about this, but I can't remember the title, but it says something along the lines of like, the sign of first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your head and balance the both of them and still function normally. And I realized like you have to be able to be critical of your own ideas and go back and forth on them, which GPT cannot do, at least right now. The more we rely on it, like you will lose your individuality. And as soon as you let GPT make those decisions for you, you and the next guy, you're all using the same thing. And so you lose your competitive edge by doing that. The good thing is, if you are able to kind of use your own brain, you can think differently from other people because there's a million paths to the same destination. GPT is usually just going to pick the kind of most popular one or whatever is the average one that people talk about because that's the thing that it's trained on. It's just trained on masses of human text. You can get creative in a way that I think GPT right now can't. AI in general cannot. And that is something that, if you rely too much on it, like you're going to get the same answer as the next guy. And if you do the same thing as the next guy, you're probably not going to get a different result from him. And you lose your edge, you lose your originality. And I think that's really important. Anyway, this is a bit of a rant just because I think GPT is making us incredibly stupid. And I have recently grown to be a lot more mindful of my own usage of GPT. I'm really getting a little bit paranoid of it. Like, I don't like using it too much because I really want to avoid this dependency and just going to it for stupid questions that I should just ask myself and not AI. But obviously it's still a really, really powerful tool and it's worth using in all those things. I do use it for other things, but I think I'm trying to use it less on a daily basis and really only when I need to push things forward, I need to do things quickly, or I need to get something done, not so much in organizing and prioritizing things in my life. That's really where I think you should ask yourself, not AI, because those questions are about you and you don't want to lose you and you don't want to lose originality. And if you go to GPT for questions that should be fundamentally made to you, then you are losing that, and then you are losing that control. I've just started to apply more of this filter about how I use it, and I think it's been quite beneficial to me. And I thought I'd share a couple of those thoughts. I think this trend will grow over time, as in I think more people might realize that maybe they're overusing it. Maybe it's just me, and that's completely fine too. But I think it's been an interesting reflection of like, these AI tools are really, really powerful, but I think in more isolated use cases, they can be super, super strong. But in a more general use case, it can create a lot of dependence, and sometimes we can go to it with the wrong questions that really should be asked to ourselves only, without external input, without influence of other things. And I think that is something that's been an important reflection recently. I think otherwise it's very easy to assume GPT is an expert in pretty much everything. And so you go to it for pretty much everything, and I don't think that's always beneficial. At least it hasn't been in my case. Anyway, feel free to comment any questions. Sorry that was a bit of a rant, but I will answer as many of the comments as possible.